And I want to get back to the January 6th committee, but do you think it's a disadvantage for Republicans to keep talking about 2020 and the 2020 election in 2022?
Well, I think for Democrats, their hope is to put uh, January 6th and President Trump on the ballot this coming November, but they'll fail at that because the Americans, it will be President Biden and congressional Democrats who are on the ballot. Frankly, from a political standpoint, Americans don't like what they've seen in states like Texas, where Democrats, applauded Joe Biden coming within 5 points of President Trump. His approval rating is at 32% right now in Texas. Every element, frankly, of the country, from the left to the right and the middle, are bitterly disappointed about his performance and what they're seeing coming out of Congress that does nothing to make their lives better. And so that's what's going to be on the ballot in November. I'm confident in the House, as Republicans were absolutely united against the socialist agenda and the damage it's doing. And I think we'll go into these elections united as well with a very positive message about, if this president wants to work together, what we can do, frankly, to repair the damage that he's done in the country, but more importantly, rebuild, for example, an economy, or restore an economy maybe even stronger than one America enjoyed before COVID.
And I just want to clarify, it was former President Trump who said just this morning that he thought it was an issue that he won, that the 2020 election was rigged, that Republicans should run on. But do you agree with Senator Mike Rounds that the former president did, in fact, lose the 2020 election? And per a statement he released, that there isn't new information nor evidence of widespread fraud that have altered the results of that election?
Jack, and let me just tell you that I've answered this for the past year, and I'm focused on the coming year. The truth of the matter is, I think the greatest threat to democracy has been, over the last 20 years, more and more Americans have lost faith in election results. It began with the Bush and Gore election. It began where Democrat leaders challenged the results of the electoral slates of President Bush twice and President Trump. I think you saw this in the polling. Before November, 60% of Americans said they didn't completely trust the results of the election. It's probably a bigger number now. I think that ought to be a red flag, especially when you've seen, while I know President Trump is criticized on this election, it was former President Carter, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden himself, during his campaign for president, called President Trump's election illegitimate. Illegitimate. So you had leaders of the Democrat Party as well setting the tone and saying the exact same things that undermine election trust. And so I really believe we're making a mistake in both parties not to understand we ought to be working together to make sure people do have trust in these elections.
Right, but we are talking about this past election, the 2020 election, and the former president is the one who does keep repeating false claims about our voting system.
You are talking about that. I understand that this is something our Democrats and some of the media want to continue to focus on, but that's pretty selective standards, I think, ignoring the contributions of the Democratic Party to distrust in elections, in which they have played, I think, a major role, and in fact set the tone for some of what we're seeing today. I've made a personal and legislative decision to focus on stopping what I think is a very dangerous agenda from the Biden administration that really, as we can tell from the inflation numbers, the border crisis, the crime crisis in America, and now the weakening of America's standing around the world. That's what I'm spending, these tax hikes. That's where I've decided to devote my time. And I think that's, for me, and certainly my constituents, exactly the right place to focus.
Right. And I know you said that you have answered this previously, but I just am wondering if we can get a clear answer just right now.
Jacqueline, I have over and over. Just Google it, and you'll see. But I think this is a game of gotcha, political gotcha, that frankly, I know some love this stuff, but back home, people already on their lives, they want to know what the answers are to this inflation, to this economy, to the crime and the border crisis. And that's where I think, frankly, the country ought to best spend their time.
Congressman, I'm not trying to play gotcha with you. There are countless audits happening in swing states
Yeah,
across the country right now that have been directed by Republicans, and a GOP-led ballot review in Arizona just came out a
yeah.
few
And
weeks
Jacqueline, I
ago.
understand. Look, there is, and there have been improvements in my view. Some of the states have taken on areas of the election to make sure that we make it easier, like Texas, to make it easier to vote and tougher to cheat. Actions which, frankly, I think will help restore trust in elections. I wish more state legislatures were doing that, just as Florida did after the Bush-Gore election. Pull back the curtain, both parties, to find out how do we make sure we're doing this the right way and building that confidence. I'd like to see more of that continue. Again, while we are dueling each other over imaginary claims of voter suppression, we ought to be focused on, again, election integrity in a bipartisan way. I think would serve the country so much better.